Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the August edition of the Divorce Support Club with me, Claire Macklin, and Lev from Ian Walker Family Law. I'll let Lev perhaps introduce himself briefly, and then I'll introduce myself too. So, Lev, over to you.
Thank you, Claire. Yes, I am Lev Boriaco. I am a chartered legal executive in our family team, obviously at Ian Walker Family Law. We are a specialist family team who specialise solely on family issues, which include divorce, separation between unmarried couples, child disputes, and generally anything that comes under the family umbrella.
Brilliant. And together with Ian Walker Family Law, I set up the Divorce Support Club it's been coming up 3 years ago now, I think, to provide a space where people can come to get information, guidance, some assistance from an angle other than just simply legal from Ian Walker. So I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment. I'm going to share my screen and then I will introduce myself as well. Give me a thumbs up, Lev, when you can see that. Perfect, thank you very much. So my name's Claire Macklin. I'm a specialist breakup and divorce coach. I'm a master NLP practitioner and a former lawyer. I've been divorced twice, so I've got plenty of experience, personal experience to bring to the table. I'm also a single mum of 2 boys, and I've been a single mum to them since they were 1 and 3. They're now 19 and nearly 17. And I'm the author of a book, Breakup from Crisis to Confidence, which is here. You can get your copy on Amazon if you would like to. As I was saying, the DSC was set up to give a safe space for anybody going through a separation or divorce to get guidance and information and top tips with how to cope really with a divorce, because it's accepted that divorce and separation is one of the most traumatic things you can go through in life. So our aim is to help you concentrate on you rather than on your ex-partner, to become calm, to get clarity and information and knowledge around the things that perhaps worry you, to focus on what you can control rather than what you can't, to see options and choices, so rather than feeling stuck, to communicate more effectively, and ultimately to create a new, vibrant future that you're excited about. And today we are going to talk about what do you do if your family holiday or your holiday this summer was a total disaster and you've decided that really what you want is to separate from your partner and you want a divorce. Now, I know that it's very rare for anybody to make a decision to go for a divorce or ask for a divorce on the basis of one bad holiday. Usually there's been tension rising for some time, and there have been problems for some time. But it's true to say, I think, that divorce inquiries for solicitors peak in kind of February, March after Christmas, and also again in August and September after holiday times when families spend much more time together. And of course, the media portrayal of what our summer holidays should look like is, of course, totally different to what the reality is for many people. You know, the media shows happy families dancing and singing and running around playing games in the sunshine with blue skies, a lovely Mediterranean Sea, lots of laughter. But the reality might be very different. And sometimes the gap between what we hope our holiday is going to be up here, or our expectation, and the reality down here is disappointment in the middle. And it may be that there are all kinds of reasons for that. So perhaps you've got the added pressure of childcare over the long summer holidays and all of the juggling that entails, and your temper's perhaps afraid. Perhaps currently you're under financial pressure, and so you haven't been able to get away in the holidays. The holiday period has been really hard work. Perhaps you have spent increased time together and you manage normally because you don't actually spend that much time with your spouse or your partner. Maybe you've been growing apart for a long time. Perhaps your children are older and leaving home, and now it's just you, and perhaps you've realised that there isn't very much that you have in common with your partner anymore. Or you've decided a while back together that divorce is the right thing for you, and you've waited until your holiday and your booked holiday perhaps was taken. Or perhaps like me with my second marriage, a light bulb went off while you were on holiday and you just know that you can't be there anymore. One thing's for sure, no one decides on a whim that they want a divorce from their spouse. So it's likely that there's been a long build-up to making this decision. And we understand it's a really difficult, challenging decision to make. And so it's really important to make that decision without regret. So my clients often come, I often work with people who are thinking about asking their spouse for a divorce. And they often ask me, what if I regret this decision? What if I'm making a big mistake? So to make sure that it really is what you want to end the relationship, and that's without regret, it's worth going through an exercise of kind of almost pros and cons within your relationship. So jotting down some of the things that you value in the relationship, the things that you do like and that you do appreciate in your spouse and in the relationship. And perhaps this isn't something that you do very often, because as humans, we tend to concentrate on the negative. We have a negative bias. And there are statistics out there that suggest that we remember one negative comment far more than we remember 5 other positive comments that are made to us. So these are some questions that you could perhaps use as a basis for doing some journaling and some thinking about the relationship before you have this conversation. So what do you value in it? What do you like about the relationship? What does it give you? What do you value in your partner? And what would you like to improve in the relationship? So where are some of the issues perhaps? Maybe what aspects of your partner's behaviour are unacceptable or uncomfortable to you? And importantly, what's my part in this? What could I do differently in this relationship? And specifically, what could you commit to doing perhaps differently for maybe the next 2 months, just to make sure that this decision really is the right one for you? If you're honest, perhaps maybe going through these questions, you'll realise that actually what you want is for your spouse to do lots of changing, and that's not going to happen. Or perhaps there are things that you realise you could change in yourself and that you're willing to compromise on. Everybody's situation will be entirely different. So go through these questions, really, really openly, really honestly with yourself. You could discuss the questions with your partner if that feels like something that would be good to do, or you could just do this on your own. And some further questions as well to think about. And this one was really important. I remember before I ended my second marriage. If I stay and nothing changes, how will that feel in 5 years? Because if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results, which is great if what you're doing is working and you're happy. Not so great, though, if your relationship is unhappy or it just doesn't feel quite right. And then ask yourself, what are your choices? So I talk a lot about choices and how choices give you power. So in your situation, perhaps consider what choices you've got, and maybe they look something like this. So choice number 1 might be, I stay and nothing changes, and I accept that nothing's going to change. Number 2, I stay and I suggest that we work on our relationship together. Perhaps we go and see a relationship counsellor or guidance, marriage guidance. Option C might be, I stay and I make changes to my own behaviour, just to see if I get a different outcome, to see if that has any effect. Or the 4th option might be, I decide that I'm going to leave. And perhaps there are more choices in your situation. And then imagine your closest friend standing next to you and think about what advice they would offer. This was really important again to me. I remember one of my closest friends actually did ask me a really good question. Maybe 2 or 3 months before I ended my second marriage. She said, your life's really hard every day, isn't it? And I had to say, yes, actually it does feel really hard every day. Every day feels like a struggle, and I knew that I didn't want my life to feel like that. And it shocked me that she saw through the kind of positive, cheerful exterior that I portrayed to the world. And that question was one of those moments when everything just became a little bit clearer. And it also lessened my feeling that I would be judged if I did end the relationship. And then in the same week, another friend asked me who was in my support network. And I listed off some people, and she said, well, that's really interesting. And I noticed that you didn't mention your partner in that list, and another penny dropped for me at that moment in time. Now, those friends were really giving me a message. And yeah, so think through what your friend would ask, what questions they might ask you, and what message they might like to give to you. Ending a relationship or a marriage can be really fraught with fear as well, but so can staying. And fear can really hold you back. So I would really encourage you to face your fears head on. Be really honest with yourself about what it is that you're afraid of. So on a big piece of paper, perhaps write down all the things that you're afraid of were you to leave the relationship. Get them out of your head and onto a piece of paper. And that can be kind of cathartic in itself, as it stops those fears kind of swirling around in your head. And then ask yourself these questions. How could I overcome that? Or how could I mitigate that? What information do I need? And what do I need to be clear about this? Who do I need to speak to? Do I need some legal advice? Do I need some financial advice? What other information might I need about the process? Who could help me with this? Or who could I talk to? Do you know somebody perhaps who's navigated this journey really well? Or do you know somebody who could offer you some connections or some advice? What's the worst that could happen? But also, what's the best that could happen? So assuming now, moving from here, that you have decided that this is what you want and that you do want to separate, what's going to be the important things to do first of all? So from my perspective, one of the most important things you can do is set your intention for how you want to show up in this process. And who do you want to be? What do you want your relationship with your ex-spouse or your ex-partner to look like? And that's not just your relationship with them as your ex-partner, but also your relationship with them as your fellow co-parent if you have children. And though it's really important that you keep those two separate, you might feel all kinds of emotions about your ex-partner as your ex, but they need to be kept separate from your feelings about them as your fellow parent. And what would you want that relationship to look like in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years? That can be really helpful to keep you on the straight and narrow. Whenever you're going to say anything or ask any kind of questions, you can then think, is this going to take me nearer or further away from where I want to be? And also, how do you want to feel when you look back on this period of your life? How do you want to feel about how you behaved and what you said and what you did? And there's a really important reason why this is also important, because separation and divorce will affect all aspects of your life. Potentially, it will affect where you live. It will affect your plans for your future. It may affect your work. It may affect your children, and everything is connected. So to follow that through, how you show up, the intentions that you set, and how you manage yourself in your separation will affect how your spouse also shows up. And that will then affect whether you're able to listen to each other, how successfully you can communicate, whether you can see options and choices. And that will affect how able and willing you both are to try and find solutions and to try and find an amicable and healthy way forward. And that, in turn, will affect how your children will cope, and it will affect how well you're able to function at work. And crucially, that will affect how much you will need to spend on it. Because the more acrimonious and the more argumentative and the more founded in very strong emotions your divorce is, the longer it will take, the more expensive it will become generally. And that then in turn will affect what resources you have available to share and also the future that you'll be able to create. So that's why I say setting your intentions is so important, because the most expensive, acrimonious, damaging divorces are the ones where the parties make decisions through a fog of emotion. The biggest factor determining the cost of your divorce generally is how you choose to handle it. And fighting with your ex-spouse is a really surefire way to experience an expensive and painful, long divorce process. And the emotional cost can also be huge, with your children perhaps being caught in the middle. And there's lots of evidence to show that it's not divorce per se that damages children, it's them being caught in the middle of conflict between their parents. And you may also lose a huge chunk of your life to it. Even if your ex is particularly challenging and does their very best to make it hugely full of conflict and acrimonious, there are things that you can do to navigate your way through sanely and coming out healthily the other side. And we've talked about that in a previous webinar about how to handle a very challenging ex. And I'm happy to talk anybody through some of those strategies if they'd like to. So set your intentions. And then be aware of the emotional journey. Now, there are different stages in this. This theory was first espoused by a psychologist in the late 1960s, and she was looking at bereavement. And it's accepted now that these stages are what you go through when you go through a divorce. Now, you'll go through these stages whether you are the person who has asked for the divorce or whether you're the person who's on the receiving end of that news. And you may do it at different times and in different ways. But there are five main stages. The first is denial and shock, where you might avoid what's happening. You probably feel very afraid. You perhaps feel numb. You might feel confused. You might not believe that it's happening. And if you're the person who is asking for the divorce, you may have been through this stage already by this point. The next stage is anger. So maybe you feel frustrated. Perhaps your ex is behaving in ways that you don't like. You might feel anxious. Perhaps you feel that you're being judged. You perhaps feel an element of shame about what's happening. All of those things can come out in anger. And although anger has an increased amount of energy with it, that energy doesn't always result in you perhaps doing things that you later can feel proud of. The next stage is bargaining. So this is where you might have thoughts like, well, if only I had been better at cooking, or if only I had been more attractive, or if only I had been funnier, or if only I hadn't done that particular thing, this wouldn't be happening. This stage is part of your brain trying to get used to the idea that this is happening. It's struggling to find a meaning in what's going on. And you may find yourself at this point telling the story to lots of different people. The next stage is depression. So perhaps you feel overwhelmed, you don't feel like you have any energy, perhaps you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, you perhaps feel helpless. And I remember when I was getting divorced the second time, being quite surprised that I also had low days, even though it was what I wanted. I still had low days where I felt lonely, where I felt afraid of what the future looked like. And then the final stage is acceptance, where you feel like you can live with this. You may not have wanted it. It may not be what you planned for your life, but you can live with it. You can explore options, and you're beginning to plan for life ahead, and you feel you have some hope, some motivation. And you may swirl around these stages. They're not linear. You may feel all five of them in one day sometimes. It can be very up and down, a bit like a roller coaster. But it's really important that you're aware of that journey, because it's a bit like walking a path. You and your partner will be at different stages at different times on that path. So what I would say is, if you're the person who is asking for a divorce, be really aware that your ex-partner is likely to be at an earlier stage on this journey than you are. So reminding yourself to be compassionate, to perhaps be a little bit patient, allow them some time to catch up, especially if you've been thinking about separation for a while and they're way behind you, or it's a total shock to them. And I'm always very thankful to my first ex-husband for doing exactly that, for giving me some time to get to a point where I could actually start to think about the process of going through our divorce. I'd also say prepare for when you tell your partner. So choose your moment. Think about when you want to have this conversation. So don't pick a time when there's lots going on, the children need to be taken here, there, and everywhere. You're sort of cooking dinner, probably not last thing at night. Choose your moment so that you're not going to be interrupted. Perhaps the children aren't around for a morning or whatever. But so choose your moment quite carefully. Be really clear about your intentions. So set out how you want to behave in this process. Avoid blaming and shaming. So avoid those kind of, well, I'm doing this because you said X, Y, and Z. Don't bring up things from the past, and speak from the I. So own your feelings, own that you want this. Keep it simple, and don't make assumptions. So don't make assumptions about how your ex-partner is going to respond, what they might feel, and what they might say, what they might do. And remember that you can only control your own reactions. So you can't control what they say, what they do, how they feel. You can only control your own. And listen to understand rather than to respond. So if you find yourself hearing their words but thinking about what you're going to say next, just take a breath and try and listen. so that you can understand where they're coming from. That will really help you in the days and months ahead. And practice what you want to say. Perhaps say it in front of a mirror, go through it in your mind so that you're clear on what you want to say in this conversation and how you want to frame it. I thought it would be worth just a very little bit about telling the children, because this comes up a lot with my clients. So just briefly, do plan what you're going to say when you tell the children and how you're going to say it. And again, choose your moment. Again, keep it simple and calm and in age-appropriate language. And if you can, explain what's going to change and what won't. And give them time to ask any questions and answer those questions honestly. And of course, reassure them that this isn't their fault, that you both love them, that you're both still going to be their parents. And if you can cooperate with your spouse and tell them together and present a united front, that's always going to be a really good thing to do. Don't tell them details that they don't need to know. They don't need to know all the ins and outs of the arguments that you may have had or other things that are going on in the background. Don't blame each other and don't rush it. So choose a time when you don't have to rush off. And also, I would say don't make promises you can't keep. So if they ask, for example, where are we going to live and you don't know the answer, then don't say, I promise we can always stay here. Just say that say that you don't know the answers to everything just yet, but you'll tell them as soon as you're possibly able to, and but reassure them that everything is going to be okay. There's also if you look back on the DSC library, there is a specific DSC meeting about supporting children. There's much more on all of this in that session, so go back and have a look at that one if you'd like to know more about that. And then I'd say gather your support network together. So whether you are the person who is asking for the divorce or whether you're the person on the receiving end, you're going to need support. So get your emotional support in place. Even when separation is your choice, you're going to need support. So your friends and family are going to be really useful, hopefully, but do remember they probably have strong emotions about this too. They perhaps can sometimes fuel the fire. So spend time with your radiators rather than your drains, those people who lift you, those people who help you to feel better. But choose your confidants wisely. There's nothing worse than being the subject of gossip at the school gate in September. So choose who you speak to and who you share your confidences with really wisely. And get some professional advice. And I'm going to ask Lev in a minute about getting early legal advice, but get clear on the process and get specific advice for your situation. And both from a legal and a financial perspective, get all the information you need to be really clear. And then lastly, make sure that you take care of yourself. It's really easy when you're going through a separation or divorce to neglect taking care of you. So make sure that you are doing things to help yourself to sleep. So have a really good evening routine, perhaps, and avoid caffeine after a certain time. Don't look at your emails late into the evening. Switch your phone off perhaps an hour before you go to bed. I remember switching mine off an hour before I went to bed, but not switching it on again until I'd had my breakfast in the morning when I was going through my separation. Make sure that you eat. I found that incredibly hard. So I went to eating little and often and making sure that things I did eat were quite healthy. So yeah, eating because your body's going to need fuel. And exercise, a little bit of exercise. And also doing something, just one thing every day that's kind for you, that shows that you're valuing yourself, that helps you to take a step back from all of this that's going on a daily basis. Just 5 minutes, 10 minutes of doing something that you find relaxing. I know a lot of my clients use an app called Headspace to listen to meditation, or they use mindfulness techniques, or they go for a walk in the sunshine, whatever it might be. Do things that help to nourish you and help you to feel better, because you're going to need energy to go through this process. Just going to stop sharing. So those are my tips. But if you've had the disastrous holiday from hell and you've decided that really what you need is to ask for a divorce from your spouse, And Lev, is there any particular advice from a legal perspective that you'd offer our listeners in terms of perhaps getting that early initial advice around the process so that they have clarity?
Yeah, very, very, very much so, Claire. I think first and foremost, I think great presentation as always. I
Thank you.
just wanted to kind of touch upon some of the points you discussed, but more from kind of my side of things. And obviously, divorce is a very big step for any individual to take. And one of the very first questions that we ask as lawyers, especially for individuals that come to see us in relation to divorce and separation, is, do you feel that your marriage is irretrievably broken down? The reason we ask that question is because that is now the sole criteria to commence divorce. But what it hopefully kind of directs people to consider is whether it has broken down beyond a measure where it can't be fixed. Um, it may sound a little bit silly, this coming from an individual who practices in this area, but from my perspective, our first priority is, if a marriage can be saved, that should be explored first. And there are some amazing services out there in relation to reconciliation, to try to make things work. So that's kind of the first step. I think the second step, I think it's important to discuss, is picking the right lawyer. I think there is a little bit of an assumption out there that all lawyers are the same. Um, all lawyers aren't the same as, all builders aren't the same, and all divorce coaches aren't the same. Um, we at Ian Walker Family Law, we're part of a group called Resolution. So we're all Resolution members, and what that means is that we promote amicable divorces. It avoids using language which can aggravate a situation, and ultimately working with both the clients and all professionals involved towards reaching an end goal. Um, I say to a lot of my clients that, stripping everything back, for most individuals, the end outcome is the same. They want to achieve a fair settlement. So sometimes taking a step back and moving towards reaching a fair settlement, as opposed to taking an entrenched stance of this is what I want, can actually result in us reaching a very amicable and sensible solution. Yes, yeah. So I've done that. One of the things I was going to say in relation to kind of solicitors, and I think there are a lot of practices out there that are generic family law firms. And for those that don't know, a solicitor can practice in many areas of law. A solicitor can be a criminal solicitor as well as a family, and they can specialize in contracts and torts. What that tends to mean, again, from my perspective, is that they know a little bit about a lot of information, but not a lot about a specific type. So we are specialist family solicitors, and this is all that we do. We do provide specialist advice. On that topic, and I think one of the things you said is get some specific advice. I think getting advice at an early stage is very important. And we at Ian Walker, we offer an initial consultation, and I see quite a lot of individuals for initial consultation, and we do this as a fixed fee exercise. I feel that it's important for an individual to make that choice. They need to have all the information. You can't make an informed decision without knowing what is available for you. So even if it is an initial consultation, which allows you to have all the information so you can make an informed decision, that is very important. What I hear a lot from initial consultations is, my friend's been through a divorce and this is the settlement that she's got. And this is therefore, do you think I'll get this? Divorce is a very personal matter. No individual's divorce is going to be exactly the same as anybody else's. So it's important to take those individual considerations into account when looking at what a fair settlement would be for an individual. So it is very important to get that specific advice for you. And I would urge our listeners to uh, take with a pinch of salt potentially any
Mm.
stories they may have heard online, read, or with friends in relation to the end outcome, because your story is not the same as theirs, and therefore the end outcome rarely is going to be duplicated on that front.
I think that's a
Uh,
really important point, Lev. Not to assume that your divorce is going to be like your best friends or like your sisters or like the person down the roads, and to go and talk to a solicitor at a very early stage to understand the process and the different options that are available for you in your circumstances. I do remember when I went to an initial consultation with the lawyer that I used for my first divorce, that I took my dad along, which was really helpful. He didn't say anything in the meeting, but he took copious notes, and I only came away remembering one sentence,
yeah,
which thankfully was, "You don't need to do anything right now. Wait, get ready, and then come back and see me again." Other than that, I remembered absolutely nothing. So it was really helpful to have somebody along who didn't interfere, didn't say anything, but just wrote notes so that I could go back to that at a later stage. So that's perhaps something. I was going to ask you actually, Lev, what kind of things should our listeners be thinking about taking along to a first session so that they can perhaps get the most out of one of those initial consultations with you?
yeah, very much so. I think in relation to what to bring along, generally what I tell individuals that I see is, bring along with you as much information as possible. So, what we do before an initial appointment, we usually set up an individual through our form provider. It's called Setify. What this allows them to do is effectively complete a set of answers before the hearing, which largely revolve around an individual's financial position. Um, then what that allows us to do is to get a bit of a picture before we step into a meeting. And what that avoids us doing is spending the first 30 minutes or 40 minutes effectively being a data gathering exercise. It also points out to us effectively any areas that they may have missed. We feel that this is best because for most individuals, it's that question: what do I bring along? They
Mm,
don't know, and therefore, when you have specific questions that are directing you, it does focus an individual's mind.
yeah.
Um, Obviously, if that's not available, what we as legal practitioners will require is a summary of what your financial position is, and if possible, a summary of your spouse's financial position. And this includes things such as cash savings, as well as house valuations. Um, for most individuals, what they tend to overlook, and this regularly is the biggest asset in a marriage, is pensions.
Mm,
Simply because of the fact that pensions aren't there, that you can't see them. For a young couple, it might be something that's so long in the future that they don't even consider it. But I'd say 8 out of 10 clients, the pensions involved are by far the most valuable asset.
mm. Okay, so that's really helpful. So if and actually, I remember from when I was going through my second divorce, I filled in all the forms, for one of your colleagues to have a look at, and it was really helpful to go into that meeting knowing that the person I was going to speak to already had a picture of what my situation looked like, so I didn't have to go through it all again at that meeting, which meant that we could focus on actually the issues at hand, which was to give me some advice on what an outcome potentially could look like, what the kind of steps were that I would need to take to go along that process. So it meant that I came out feeling much clearer about exactly what the road ahead looked like.
Yeah, no, I think it is important, and these meetings provide a lot of information. And obviously,
Mm,
I do appreciate that. And I think the point you touched upon as bringing a close family member or friend to these meetings, um, lots of individuals do so. And I think we as legal practitioners, myself and my colleagues, a lot of us are trained in very specific areas of law. And one of the areas of law that's up and coming is something that's known as resolution together, which is the idea of one solicitor, two clients. And the idea behind that is predominantly there are a lot of individuals out there that have simply drifted apart. They don't want to go down the usual route of me and my solicitor, you and your solicitor. All they want is legal advice in relation to the basis for them to facilitate the discussions.
Mm.
What we also do during our initial meetings is provide written advice afterwards, because of the reason you've just said. We appreciate that emotions are going to be high during these appointments, and sometimes things will be missed, and the clients may not hear given bits of advice. So it gives them that little bit of time to actually go away, calm down, read through the advice, just to get a rounded view, rather than going away and thinking, you know what, I forgot to ask a question, or I can't remember what he said in relation to a specific area of law.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's very, very helpful. And on our, it's probably worth mentioning our next divorce support club, which is on the 6th of September. We're actually going to be, or Lauren Preedy and I are going to be looking at the process of divorce. So if you've come along to this session and you want some more information about what the process looks like, what perhaps some of the different options might be, that would be a really good session to come along and attend, so that we can sort of try and take some of the mystery out of this. Because, most people most people don't want to go through a divorce at all. And if you have to, it's best to have all the information that you need to hand. It's an alien world to most of the people that I see. It's something that they never thought they were going to have to do. So to get that clarity of information is really important. So I think, unless there are any questions, we've probably covered all the things that we wanted to look at today, unless there's anything else, Lev, that you wanted to add.
No, I think a good summary has been provided.
Perfect. So all that remains, I'm just going to check that there's no questions. No, all that remains is to say thank you very much for attending, and thank you, Lev, for your time and expertise. I will make sure that this gets loaded up onto the Ian Walker Family Law website as soon as possible, and look forward to seeing as many of you as can come along on the 6th of September, when we'll talk about understanding the process. So thank you very much.